right, everybody, welcome back to the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. We are exactly 1 week away from the NFL draft tonight, and obviously there are still many, many things to go on between now and then, but we're really excited tonight to have Tony Pauline with us. Tony does outstanding work for the Pro Football Network, and also is the host of the Believe in Draft analysts on the Believe Podcast Network. And joining me also is Ian, but nobody really cares about Ian. Tony, welcome, and man, get right to it. We've seen you on a lot of different Steelers stuff this week. You sound like you're really narrowing things down for who you think the Steelers are going to take. What do you think here?
Well, all signs point to Najee Harris. They may not take him, but that's the feeling I'm getting. And you go back to last year, I thought they made a mistake not taking J.K. Dobbins in the second round. I said that all along. I thought that was their guy. Now they have a bigger hole at running back. They've got some holes on the offensive line. It seems like it's going to be Najee Harris. I know I confirmed again today they like Tevin Jenkins. I guess the big question mark is Landon Dickerson of Alabama, who obviously they need a center. He's a very talented center, terrific player on the field, but he's a horror show when it comes to his medical history.
Yes,
so I don't know how they balance that out.
Yeah, this is Ian. Thanks a lot for joining us, Tony. I had a follow-up on Dickerson. What are you hearing on his medicals? How are they checking out? Are they checking out okay? I mean, obviously there was that video of him doing cartwheels during the pro day, but I mean, doing cartwheels is a little different than, going through a full range of medical tests too.
Yeah, again, if you I reported on Pro Football Network earlier this week, he got what was called a 3- during his combine medicals, and a 3- is equal to a C-. And
wow.
It's not just the most recent knee tear that he suffered during the SEC title game. You go back and you look when he started at Florida State, he was never able to finish a season healthy. Had an additional knee tear as a freshman, had 2 significant ankle injuries, then, played well in 2019, played better in 2020, had another knee injury in the SEC title game. It's not just a question, as I said last night, with Trey Wingo, not just a question of whether or not he can stay healthy. It's when do these injuries start to rear their ugly head in the future? I mean, when could there potentially be the onset of early arthritis, inflexibility, things like that? You're really looking for, when it comes to a guy that is this injured, is he going to make it to his second contract? I don't know. They're going to have to find some sort of compromise between the talented guy, and he's not only is he talented, he's smart, he's nasty, he leads by example, versus just the awful medicals. I can say this, excuse me. If it was just an ordinary guy who got a C-, he's going to be an ordinary guy would be flagged anywhere from 1 to 2 rounds. Could even be a reject. It's a different situation with Landon Dickerson, or it could be. We'll see what happens.
That's incredible. So you can literally see him maybe going anywhere from round 1 to 3 or 4. I mean, that's how severe a difference we're talking here with those.
I have him as a 5th round grade on my board, primarily because of the medicals. Because I know he's been mocked in the first round by people. I do know the Steelers like him, but when I look at the medicals and know the history of guys who weren't as injured, had red flags that were less severe than Landon Dickerson, and saw how they fell, I struggle to see how he's going to be a top 100 pick based on the medicals.
Ian, go ahead.
Sure. So I had another question on Najee Harris too. So since 2003, Kevin Colbert's only taken 1 player in the first round that was older than 22. Obviously, running back's a huge need. Are you hearing from your sources that they're willing to kind of mitigate or buck that trend to go after a guy as talented as Harris? Because obviously on the field he's super talented.
Yeah, and he's a mature guy and he's confident in himself. I don't know that that's going to be an issue. The Steelers are at a point where they either have to get the pieces in place to win quickly, or they're going to have to be in a rebuild mode real soon. So I think Harris gives them the ability to win quicker than some of the other guys who they select. I've not heard that Harris's age is a problem. The fact is as I said in an article on Monday, he fits the identity of the Steelers. He's a big, grinded out, pounding running back with terrific short area quickness, who's also a very good blocker. And he fits the Steelers mold at the running back position.
Tony, the other guy you mentioned out of those three, Tevin Jenkins from Oklahoma State, and he's one of those guys. His tape is really fun to watch because he just gets after it. I mean, you talk about a guy that goes to the whistle and beyond. That's him. What do you see from him that fits not just the Steelers, but just fits a guy that's a good NFL tackle?
Very athletic. First of all, he's got the size. Tevin Jenkins. When you look at him, 6'6", 317 pounds. Ran under 5 seconds and his pro day. Not that you really care what a lineman runs in 40 yards, but it shows his athleticism.
Mm-hmm.
You watch the film for a taller guy. He bends his knees. He plays with terrific pad level. He easily moves around the line, easily moves off the line of scrimmage about the field, gets out to the second level and blocks well in motion, takes out linebackers. I talked with somebody earlier today, and they feel he's a college right tackle who will be able to swing over to the left side and play left tackle in the NFL because he's so athletic, because he moves so well, because he has such good agility, which is, usually it's a college left tackle who lacks the mobility to stay at left tackle, and he's got to move to the right side. This is unusual. It does happen, but this is unusual for people to say, yeah, you know what? I like this guy at left tackle or right tackle.
That makes a lot of sense too, and really with the proliferation of dual edge rushers, I mean, you have right tackles essentially having to block premier edge rushers all around the league. I mean, TJ Watt's going against right tackles for the most part too. So, having a guy on either side that's, I think the difference between a right tackle and a left tackle is kind of mitigated over time, especially recently.
Especially in certain systems. I mean, you look at Lane Johnson with the Philadelphia Eagles. Former tight end, terrific left tackle for Oklahoma. Eagles moving to the right side because of that, and because that's a fit for their system.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ian.
I was going to ask Tony a broader question. So, Tony, for some of our listeners who, may not be as familiar with your work, can you give us what's your biggest draft hit that a late round guy that you absolutely loved over time that you're like, this guy's going to be a star and everyone's sleeping on him?
I'd have to think about that one. I'll look through while you're talking. I'll look through the notes and eventually I will come to one. But there's got to be somebody out there.
Yeah. No, all good. Yeah. Go ahead, Ian.
I was going to ask an easier question. I was going to ask who's a late round guy in this draft that you love that you think is going to be a star.
I don't know about star. I mean, because star is pretty steep. Plus the fact, the late rounds in this year's draft is going to be a tough go of it because so many talented seniors have returned or took up the NCAA offer to return for a second senior season. So what you're seeing is a real dearth of talent in this draft, especially in the late rounds. I mean, there's a guy by the name of William Sherman, who's a offensive tackle from Colorado who projects to guard. I like him a real lot. I think he can be a good player. Ernest Brown of Northwestern, a edge rusher, who's probably going to go in the later rounds. He's had some injury problems in the past. He's got a high upside. I think he can be a real good player in the NFL. In the right system, Jamian Sherwood of Auburn, large size safety at 216 pounds, but not the fastest guy in the world. I think if you use him as a traditional strong safety or in a zone type system, I think he could also be a good player at the next level.
Tony, I'm going to go ahead and ask you the question that Steelers fans always want to know this time of year, especially over the last 5-7 years. Do you see them drafting a quarterback? And if they do, who's a guy that you like for what the Steelers do?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that they like Davis Mills in round 2. Now, I think a lot depends on if they're able to get an offensive lineman around or where they go in round 1. But I think Davis Mills actually would be an excellent pick, an excellent consideration for them. The guy's got great physical talent. He's got a fireball of an arm. He's got a live arm. He can make all the throws. He's somewhat athletic. He's a guy who, before the season began, scouts on the West Coast who I'm friendly with told me that if Davis Mills has the type of season that he is capable of, he could have been a top 15 pick in this year's draft. But what happened was the Pac-12 really struggled to get their act together, started their season late. It was a week-to-week grind in the Pac-12. And, to be honest about it, he played very uninspired football. I mean, he was a guy who I think lived up to expectations. At times, he's a bit late pulling the trigger, which hurts him. But still, he's got a lot of upside. And it'll be a situation where he's not forced into the lineup, which I think will be good for him. He can play behind an established quarterback. So Davis Mills is a guy I think would be a good fit and somebody to keep an eye on. Kellen Mond as well of Texas A&M if he happens to be down there.
Is he like a third, fourth round guy, you think, Mond?
I think he at the latest he's a third round guy. I'd be shocked if he gets out of day two. He's got, when you look at the physical package, he's right up there with most of the quarterbacks here as far as his arm strength, the ability to get the ball through the tight spots, the ability to drive passes downfield, the ability to pick up yardage with his legs. When I said Davis Mills is a bit late pulling the trigger with Kellen Mond, he tends to stare down the primary target a little bit too much and sometimes gives his passes away, which hurts.
Right. Yeah. Ian, go ahead if you got another one.
Sure. Yeah. So, Tony, you mentioned about how it was a wild ride in the Pac-12 this year and kind of the Big Ten too, with a lot of players opting out this season. How do you think the opt-outs are going to impact the players' draft status? Do you think we're going to see guys like Micah Parsons fall down the board a little bit because he opted out of 2020? Or do you think he'll still go, high up, or just anyone in general who opted out? How's it going to impact their draft status?
I mean, it'll be different from team to team. If Micah Parsons falls down draft boards, it's more because of off-the-field character issues, as well as the fact that his instincts run hot and cold rather than the fact that he opted out. Now, it's going to be different from team to team, and even within those team war rooms, there's going to be a lot of dissension and a lot of different opinions. I had posted, or I had said several weeks ago in a show I do with Trey Wingo that I was hearing the Miami Dolphins really did not want to take a player that opted out when they owned the third pick of the draft, because the top players at that pick would have been a Jamar Chase or Penei Sewell. And sure enough, 2 days later, they make that big trade where they go from 3 to 12 and 12 to 6. So I think that was a direct result of the fact that they didn't want to sit there and take a player that opted out. It's going to be team to team, different opinions, dissenting opinions within the team, and then you got to go player by player. I mean, a guy like Gregory Rousseau, who a lot of people mocked as a top 12 pick before the season began, I wasn't one of them, just said he was going to opt out, prepare for the NFL draft, and then he turned in a terrible pro day. So now you're looking at a guy that, I'm sorry, it wasn't a terrible pro day, a pro day that did not meet expectations.
Right.
So now you're looking at a guy who has 1 year of production on the college level, opted out, and performed poorly during his pro day. That will hurt.
So with these opt-out guys, Tony, do teams look at these guys and say, okay, they opted out to prepare for the NFL draft, but do they also view them as guys who, geez, I wonder how really passionate you are about playing football if you're opting out? Is there some of that to be said?
Yeah, absolutely. And there is some of that within certain people, in teams. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think you got to look at it as on a case-by-case basis. I mean, there's a defensive back, cornerback from Central Florida named Tay Gowan, who's a solid player, potential late-round pick. He caught COVID during the summer. He then his mom caught COVID as a result of him having it. His mom was hospitalized with COVID, with her reaction to it. So you could understand why a guy like that would probably opt out. There absolutely is that opinion or that feeling from some people. Why did a guy like Penei Sewell stay out on the sidelines, or opt out, I should say, on the offensive line? Does he love football? I've heard that before. I don't agree with it. I think it's a case-by-case basis. And again, it's not just, a guy like, say, Rousseau, where the ACC started on time, had a full season. Okay, you want to question that, that's fine. But, a Penei Sewell of Oregon, a Walker Little of Stanford, where the season was on and then it was off and then it was on again and then it wasn't starting until November and then it was a week-to-week thing. You didn't know whether you were going to be playing every Saturday depending on the COVID positives on your team and your opponents. I mean, that's tough to prepare for. So You're short. You got the long answer there. The short answer is absolutely yes. And by the way, Matt Milano, I'm looking at my list here. Matt Milano was a guy who I had as a late round pick and said he was going to do darn well at the next level. I told you I'd come up with a name.
Nice, and you did. That's great work right there.
And that's a great point about the opt-outs too, because I read an article about Micah Parsons yesterday that basically said that if the Big Ten had a regular season, he would have played in it. But when the Big Ten canceled the season, he's put together basically a training plan to get ready for the draft. And then he was already into that training plan. And I think out in California training when the Big Ten kind of, opted back into the season, and he was at that point, already training. So he was like, well, I'm just not going to go back to Penn State at that point.
And then there was, the NC2A was kind of dragging its feet on if you sign with an agent, could you come back in? Could you play the season? And a lot of these guys had signed with agents, in August when it was initially announced that the season was canceled. And I mean, it was mayhem. So a lot of these guys from the Pac-12, from the Big Ten, you have to. I don't want to say you can't blame, but you have to understand where they were coming from.
No, I think that's a great point. I think people forgot about the agent side of it too. And that's a good point that I don't think enough people are considering. Tony, before we let you go, we have a longstanding tradition here on the podcast. We always, myself and Ian and our other co-host, Ben, we usually have a nice beverage, a favorite bourbon or whiskey or something. Is there anything that you're a big fan of?
I drink beer, and I primarily drink beer from green bottles, unless I can get it on tap. I mean, I love local tap beers. I'll always go for the local tap beer. I like Newcastle on tap. I like Stella on tap. If it's out of a bottle, I'm drinking Molson or Beck's. Outstanding. Well, trust me, we enjoy beer too, for sure. Hey, thanks so much for spending a few minutes with us. We know you're busy and great work as always. And again, you can follow Tony on Twitter, by the way, at Tony Pauline, and we highly suggest that you do. Tony, thanks so much and have a great night. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot, Tony.
Bye-bye. And hey, the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast is sponsored by Deck Roofing, serving Broward and the southern Palm Beach counties, whether it's commercial, residential, multifamily, or condos. Contact Deck Roofing. Jeez, oh man, I can't talk. Today by visiting deckroofing.com. You think I'd already had a bunch of whiskey, but actually I haven't. I've just started on that.
I'm drinking some.
Yeah. Oh, geez, I'm stunned. I guess since we're talking about it,
delicious too. I'm drinking the Quiet Man again that I told you guys about.
Yeah, you
a week or two ago.
You were ranting on that.
It is so flipping good. Oh my God.
Ben, you didn't catch the interview we just completed with Tony, but we gave him a chance to talk a little bit about his favorite libations, and he's a big beer guy.
Yeah.
So he threw out, he likes his Stella and a few of those other ones. So,
don't say.
Yeah.
He said stuff in green bottles.
Stuff in green bottles. That's right. That was a great line. Stuff in green bottles. But anyway, thanks again to Tony Pauline for jumping on with us for a few minutes to talk Steelers draft. And now that's what the three of us are going to do. I really wanted us to all have our mock drafts ready to go, but I'm not going to lie. I failed to get my homework done.
You suck.
I do suck. And the part of it is because I am at a loss. I am probably.
I'm still not final on mine.
No.
I have one that's a work in progress.
I have about 12.
And, we'll see. The middle rounds to me are really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
That and, picking that late. Ian mentioned this before, but picking that late in the first round, whatever they do in the first round is going to totally skew the rest of the draft. And so it's like, I don't know, man.
And there's so many directions they can go in the first round. I mean, we've talked about it the last couple of weeks on this show. The signs and needs seem to point to them taking a running back, but when have they ever followed what the signs and needs have pointed to over the last 5 or 6 years? Like really since the Shazier pick, they've all kind of been off the wall a little bit. I mean, Bud Dupree filled a need, TJ Watt filled a need, but those weren't necessarily like the top guys people were thinking about or linking them to. So if you look past the running backs, then if they take an offensive lineman, if they take a tight end. Heck, they could take Pat Freiermuth. They take a cornerback. Like that really just skews the whole rest of the draft. And there's so much talk on Twitter, and everyone I see doing mock drafts has them taking 3 offensive players in the first 3 rounds, and they hardly ever do that. It seems like they always
a lot more balance,
alternate picks. Yeah, that I really feel like there's going to be one defensive player sprinkled in there in the first 3 rounds, and if they go corner in round 1, if they take Asante Samuel Jr. in round 1, then
which wouldn't hurt my feelings. I don't know about you guys,
nor mine.
Yeah.
Nope.
But then when do you take a lineman? They've got.
Then wait. What if they? And we talked about this before we started recording. What if they decided that a lot of the reason they failed as a running team last year was the guy who was blocking, or rather the guy who was going up against Eric Ebron was basically coming free because Ebron can't block. What if they decided that what they need there in that spot is just a guy who can block even semi-adequately, like Heath Miller as a rookie, that kind of level. Not Heath Miller in his prime, but Heath Miller as a rookie. If he could do that, their running game would be vastly improved.
Therefore, you're suggesting...
And they decide to go Pat Freiermuth and make him the tight end of the future. What if that happens? That totally throws off the rest of the draft for me.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Every year, every single year in the second round, it seems like they go value. They go with the guy they have the best grade on, and it's like people look at it and go, "Whoa, I did not see that, but that's actually a really good pick. I like that." So,
I would Freiermuth would not hurt my feelings at all. I would love that.
I'd like to see him move back if they did it, but
yes,
So I agree. And the thing is, they need starters. Essentially starters at least 3 positions, maybe 4. I mean, you need a starting running back. You can get one later, but you still need a starting running back. You need a starting center. You need a third cornerback.
Yep.
You
need a starting left tackle.
You got to have a tackle.
Yeah. And you need a number 2 tight end who's going to see significant time just because of how they run. So, I mean, that's 5 guys, and they only have 3 picks in the first 2 days. So, some of those spots are going to get shuffled back to, they have 2 picks in the 4th round. So, but 2 of those 5 are going to get shuffled back to day 3, and you're probably not going to get a starter capable guy on day 3. I mean, they got super lucky last year that Kevin Dotson fell into their laps and he was able to start.
I want to emphasize that to people. Kevin Dotson is a 4th rounder who's ready to start as a rookie is an outlier. It's the exception, not the rule. Somehow, some way, Kevin Dotson, a consensus All-American, didn't get an invite to the Combine. The Steelers got lucky. They got flat out lucky. Yeah, that guy that just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. So waiting until the 4th and 5th round to pick offensive linemen is fine if you're willing to invest 2 or 3 years in those guys and watch them develop. They don't have that kind of time this year. They need guys that can come in right now and play.
Well, especially with this being Ben's last year. I mean, you got to go for it this year. You got to do what you can to go for it, with the exception of if Justin Fields falls to 8 or 9, you have the opportunity to trade up for him.
All right. Well, let's go there then, Ian. Let's because I was going to ask you who's the one guy you would trade up, because I feel like this is, if any year, this is the year the Steelers need to trade back, get a pick or 2 extra. But is there the one guy that the Steelers might want to trade up for? And obviously you're leaning towards a Justin Fields. So what has to happen for that to occur?
So for that to occur, you would need basically him to fall past 7. Carolina's in rebuilding mode. They, could probably go for using future picks. The Broncos, we've traded with them before, but the Broncos are in a weird situation with Drew Lock. They don't know necessarily what they're going to do. So you would need, and then you've got other teams that are closer that probably also want to trade up. So you really have to sweeten the deal a little bit. I mean, if you think about if Carolina, let's just use Carolina for example. If Carolina is trading back from number 8, if say New England offers them a good deal and they only have to move down, from 8 to 15 versus moving from 8 to 24, we're going to have to give them a lot more just because there's a lot more distance they'd have to cover. That being said, we have an extra third round pick next year because of the Bud Dupree comp pick. Whenever we traded up for Devin Bush, Kevin Colbert specifically said they were willing to trade their future third round pick because they knew they had a third round pick coming back to them as a comp pick for the Le'Veon Bell deal, and it wouldn't lock them out of that round. So, I would think to get up into the top 10, it's going to cost a future first and probably
and a 3.
A future third. Yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking is if you can make that deal to get to 8 with Carolina or even 7 with Detroit at the cost of a future first and a future third and not giving up any additional picks in this draft, that's an ideal situation because this year's quarterback class is a lot better than next year's quarterback class. And you can hand that guy a clipboard and say, sit here and watch for a year and learn our offense. And then you can come in next year and kind of hit the ground running, which is what Patrick Mahomes did. He sat his first year. He didn't come right and play. They played Alex Smith for 16 weeks, and Mahomes only played in week 17 because they'd already had their playoff spot locked up and didn't have anything to play for. And then they went back to Alex Smith in the playoffs. So, but that's the one situation that I would trade up for is, if Carolina or Denver or Detroit or whoever is willing to take that deal of, not getting any more picks in this year's draft, which is a hard sell.
It's a very hard sell.
But giving them a future first and a future third, but for a rebuilding team like a Carolina who doesn't have a quarterback, really. I mean, they traded for Darnold and still kind of have Bridgewater, but, they don't have a quarterback for all intents and purposes. So, having multiple first and third rounders next year, I mean, you're essentially giving them 2 top 100 picks next year. It might be worth it for them.
Yeah. So, Ben, is Fields the guy you would move up for, or anybody else if they fell to that?
Fields is the only one I would move up for. I don't know if Penei Sewell somehow dropped, I'd move up for him, but that's not going to happen. So forget it. It's going to be a weird year. It's going to be a weird draft. I think guys that we don't expect to fall are going to fall. I think that teams are going to place more emphasis on guys who played this year as opposed to guys who sat out this year.
Yes.
There's a lot less medical information publicly available to be consumed by people like us than there is in most years. Everything's a lot more close to the vest this year. So it's hard to really get a sense for exactly what's going to happen and who's going to fall. We're going to find out that day, but I don't think the quarterbacks are going to fall, unless your name is Kyle Trask. He sucks, incidentally.
You mean Mason Rudolph Jr.?
I think he's better than Mason. Dane Brugler says he's a carbon copy. I think he's smarter than Mason. I don't think Mason's very smart. I'm sorry, and you guys all know that. I'm on record with that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a question of balls. I think he's got the guts to do what he needs to do out there. He just doesn't see it quickly enough to react to the situation. I don't think he reads defenses very well, and I think Trask is better in that respect.
Okay. He may be, but their throws outside the numbers are very similar in that they just float.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you just can't have that.
No.
On an 18-yard out, if you're throwing the ball up with that much air underneath it, you're giving the corner time to make up the distance, make up the separation, and either deflect the ball, get a pass breakup, or get a pick. And that just can't happen. An 18-yard out has got to be thrown in a spot where only the receiver can get it, nobody else.
Ben, one of the guys that Tony Pauline brought up quarterback-wise was Davis Mills out of Stanford, who quite frankly has gotten zero buzz until maybe like the last couple weeks. He really likes him, thinks he'd be a fit for the Steelers, real big arm. Just not a lot of body of work because I think he only started 11 or 12 games. He thinks he's going to go in the second round. I don't know that I'm that high on him, but have you had a chance to look at him at all?
I know nothing about this guy.
Okay.
All I will tell you is I'll be surprised if the Steelers take a quarterback.
As will I.
If they do take one, it would be really early, and it would just be a situation where the value was just too good to pass up, and they had to do it. But all the first round rated quarterbacks are going to be gone by 24.
Yes.
I think they're going to be gone by 15. Even Mac Jones, who I would be absolutely apoplectic if they chose. I still don't get the hype behind him. If he goes top 5, okay, whatever. I just I don't see him taking a quarterback this year. That's it.
I don't either.
And Davis Mills, I have not, I'll be honest, I have not looked at him. I haven't even considered looking at him. Looks to me, sounds to me like he's going to be a developmental guy, limited experience.
Definitely.
Maybe he's got the big arm. Big arm is important. I mean,
it is. He can make
a
all
guy
the
like
throws.
Josh Allen,
Yep.
Came in, looked like trash for about a year and a half. Then he finally got his act together, and now, he looks like he's going to be a very good quarterback. So that's a huge advantage.
So if we're talking first round guys here, most of us, and we've talked about this on previous shows, the Pittsburgh Steelers have a very clear pattern of what they have done under Kevin Colbert in the first round. The only time they've gone away from Power 5 is when they drafted Ben Roethlisberger in 2004.
Can I just jump in real quick?
Yeah.
First 2 rounds. So only times under Colbert in the first 2 rounds they went outside the power conferences. It was we'll say power conferences because it was Power 6 essentially with the Big East and the old BCS, but the Power 5 now. But yes, true. So the only time in the first 2 rounds they've gone outside the Power 5 was 2004 when they took Ben in the first round and Ricardo Coakley out of Tiffin in the second round. So that
was a great choice.
Yeah, one of those worked out really well. One of them did not. But yes, so that's essentially, what do we say? 21 drafts, 20 picks because we traded our second round pick for Devin Bush. We traded our first round pick for Make It. So yeah, 20 drafts, 19 out of 20 guys have been from Power 5 conferences.
So, and to piggyback on that, we also know that only a very small amount of times the team or tandem of Colbert and Tomlin, they make pro day visits. And was it Ziggy Hood 2009? Was that the last time that they've drafted somebody in the first round that they did not actually see in a pro day? Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
And they did go to Chase Claypool's last year. Granted, he was a second round pick, but he was their first pick of the draft. So yeah.
True. And this year the tandem went to, and you can fill in the blanks here, guys. They attended Alabama. They went to Florida State. They did Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Notre Dame, and help me out. Clemson,
Auburn.
Let's
see. Hold on. I think there was. Hold on. I'm just going to go in order on my list here. So it was Clemson, Georgia, Auburn, Florida State, Alabama, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame. So that's 9, I think.
So quite often when you sit down and you look at a Steelers draft, that's where we often start, is we start looking at where were Colbert and Tomlin, who are they looking at, who fits a spot there. And to be very honest, guys, when I do that, I struggle to find guys that check all those boxes. And other boxes would include guys that are young.
That is correct. Since 2003. Yes, since 2003, only one first-round pick was older than 22 years old, and that was Jarvis Jones, which didn't work out too well. 2002, they took Kendall Simmons, who was also 23 years old. But everyone else in the first round has been 22 and younger.
And so if you're kind of crossing they're checking the boxes here, Najee Harris is 23 years old. But every other box checks. They were there at his pro day. They've talked to him. They've seen him, blah, 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 all these other things.
High character, has the ability.
Tremendously high. Yep.
The only thing that he's missing is breakaway speed.
Yep.
But he can run guys the fuck over.
He can run guys the fuck over, and he can also jump over them. He's a really good receiver.
Sneaky good at that. Sneaky good because he doesn't look like
really good receiver. I mean, he's not Le'Veon Bell good. Doesn't run routes that well, but he catches the ball without breaking stride and just keeps moving.
So, is it possible?
One other thing to point out, because Tony Pauline mentioned this guy's name is Tevin Jenkins. Not only did Colbert and Tomlin not go to Oklahoma State's pro day, Jenkins is also 23 years old. So that's 2 boxes he doesn't check. So I'm a little skeptical on
Jenkins, I would love to have.
I love watching.
Okay, listen.
I don't think
I would like
Jenkins
to have him.
Colts.
I think you're probably right. I would like to have Jenkins, but I don't see him making the transition to left tackle.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that he's as physical as he is, that he's brutal. I mean, he's just watching the guy. It's just like, oh my God.
He's a baller.
Personally, if I drafted him, I would stick him at guard. He would be a perennial all-pro guard. I'll bet you 80% of his career.
Mm-hmm.
He'd be a Hall of Famer. I wouldn't even waste him at tackle. I don't see the point in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
He shouldn't be offended by that. Guards make a lot of money now. I know the left tackles make more, but he's not going to be a left tackle anyway. He's going to be a right tackle or a guard. And the Steelers already have a bunch of right tackles. So I just don't see that as a good fit.
Yep.
And I agree with Ian. I don't think he gets past the Colts.
So just to back up something Ben said, the mock draftable website, which has those wonderful little spider charts, but also has, player athletic comparisons for, who they match up with.
Mm-hmm.
One of Tevin Jenkins' top comparables is Steve Hutchinson, who was a Pro Bowl guard.
Pro Bowl guard.
There you go.
And is a Hall of Fame guard.
Hall of Fame guard. From Michigan, I might add, University of Michigan.
Yeah, that was before they sucked.
That was back before the Harbaugh days when they didn't suck so much.
Yes, back when they were respectable, at least.
Yeah, but I mean, Jenkins is just violence.
Oh, he's fun to watch.
Talk about a guy who plays to the echo of the whistle. That guy. Yeah. He's not Chris Kimoyatu. He's not looking for fights. He just plays hard. Hard.
So
and he beat up guys that are going to get drafted in the first round this year.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I just gotta say, Tony named those 2 guys, Najee Harris, Tevin Jenkins, and then the third guy was Landon Dickerson.
What?
Look.
Dickerson?
Well, he mentioned him because he thinks the Steelers like him. Now, he came back and said, look, the medicals are just too glaring. He's got a 5th-round grade on him.
So he has a 5th-round grade on him, but he thinks the Steelers will take him in the 1st. Maybe.
He can see it. I think that's – I don't want to put words in his mouth, but if you go back to the beginning, I think that's what he was saying. I'll have to listen
to it.
Yeah. And I look, I'm not there either. I don't – the only guy I would take
I'll just go on record a week out from the draft.
Yeah.
I absolutely would not take Dickerson with any sooner than the late 3rd. I have a 4th on him.
I agree. I don't.
And it's because of that injury history. I would love to have him in a power blocking scheme if he could stay healthy. But I'm not willing. If I'm an NFL GM, I'm not willing to make that bet.
No, I'm not either. I'm not either. And so I really think those 3 guys. Now let me offer you this, guys, and Ian, go ahead. But Najee Harris, yes, he's 20. Now, yes, he's 23.
Mm-hmm.
But I know I've got Ben Roethlisberger likely for one last year. Then I know that I'm probably going to have a new quarterback, and nothing helps a new quarterback more than a good running game.
Stout running game.
You know what else helps a new quarterback is a good offensive line.
Yes, it does. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not trying to steer any directions
Andy Dalton's
here.
Pro Bowl career in Cincinnati. Andy fucking Dalton. People were talking about him like he was elite, and I was like, no, he's not. He's got a great line.
Well, but look, I want line ahead of running back in the 1st round. But that said, what I'm getting at is if the Steelers think we can plug this kid in, Najee Harris, right now, plug him in, we use him up for 5 years, and then send him on his way, much like they did with Le'Veon Bell, right? Not granted, it wasn't 5 years because he was a second-round pick.
It was 5 years.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is maybe that's the way they view that. Get your 4 or 5 years out of him, then it's done. And he's helped us transition from Ben Roethlisberger to a new quarterback, and maybe we won some games along the way. That's the only justification for me as to why they would take him.
He's pretty durable.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that he's a guy that's going to peter out after his first contract.
Okay.
I think he's probably going to be a guy who makes some money. But, things can change.
Yeah.
That's the nature of the NFL, but he's been pretty durable. He certainly plays violently enough that you see it in him where you're not concerned that he might take a hit and not be able to perform anymore.
Mm-hmm.
By the same token, in my opinion, if they draft him this year, he's going to take a lot of hits. A lot of hits behind the line of scrimmage, just like the Steelers running backs last year, which is why I would not take him. I would invest in the trenches. But that said, the Steelers aren't asking me what I think.
No, they're
going
not.
to do what they're going to do.
They're no doubt listening to this podcast, however, because they need as much information as they can get.
Yeah.
And we all know they are.
Kevin Colbert's listening to our podcast, sure.
Oh, shit. Are you kidding me? He's waiting right now. He's got his phone in one hand, his laptop in the other. He's waiting for this podcast to drop. I know it. Yeah. Anyway, something that we talked about earlier today. Alex Highsmith. I like Alex Highsmith. I think he did a really nice job last year in the situation that he found himself in. What if the Pittsburgh Steelers, Ian, what if they're not as high on him as the fan base is? How does that affect the draft?
I mean, we talked about this last week. They're going to take an edge rusher somewhere in this draft.
They will. Yep.
Because they don't have any depth there. It's Watt and Highsmith and Cassius Marsh, who sucks. So they're going to take an edge rusher. And if they take one early, that's not necessarily a bad thing to bring in some competition and at least have somebody who you feel like could take rotational snaps this year at either edge rusher position. Because let's face it, Highsmith and TJ Watt probably shouldn't be playing, 65, 70 snaps a game. They should ideally get a couple off just to preserve them throughout the year. Yeah. So you want someone you can plug in there as a rotational guy. The guy I always go back to is like Arnold Harrison. You never heard, he never started a game, but remember how good he was when he came in? Like he could come in and, fill right in for Clark Higgins or, Joey Porter or whoever, and really didn't. I mean, he wasn't the pass rusher that Joey Porter was.
Oh,
but
no.
He could play,
he set the edge well.
Set the edge. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, someone like that, is a rotational guy that can play well. We've talked about before, you should always gamble on athletic upside for edge rushers. So, I think they're going to draft someone, and it may not intend to be an open competition in training camp, but if they draft someone good enough, it could wind up being a competition, and you could see them splitting snaps or splitting drives and things like that. So yeah, I mean, this is
pretty far-fetched, guys. I don't see it. I just
think they like Highsmith that much?
No, and it's not a question of whether or not they like him. This edge class sucks.
Yes, it does.
This edge class is terrible. In order for them to take someone who was talented enough to compete with Highsmith, given the experience he already has and his natural ability, he has both. They'd have to take a guy in the second round, no later. But I don't see it.
Okay.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it'll be what I talked about before, where the value is just too great with a guy they got a great grade on in the second round, and he's an edge player, and they go, screw it, we're taking him.
It always
but it would
seems
have to be
to me.
It would have to be a situation like that,
right,
for someone to come in and threaten Highsmith's playing time, in my opinion.
Right.
So what if Jalen Phillips from Miami, who just blew it up at his pro day, tested super athletically. Jalen Phillips or Jason Owe, what if one of them falls to you in the second round at 55? If one of them's available, or what if Joseph Osai from Texas is there at 55?
Well, first, I don't want Jason Owe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how well he tested. He wasn't productive. I don't think he knows how to finish. Jalen Phillips, if he were somehow there at 55, yeah, you might have to consider that, but he's not going to be there, in my opinion. Kwity Paye, I really hope isn't there because I'm afraid they would take him, and I don't like him.
Me either.
Joseph Osai? I mean, maybe. He's young. He's a guy that's got a lot of upside,
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
My overall point is this. It seems to me that every draft we go into it thinking we know exactly what the Pittsburgh Steelers are looking to do.
Well, exactly is not the right word, but we think we have an idea.
Okay, and that's fair. What I mean is there's always one position that we as fans tend to view differently than the way the team does. And it's usually that situation that comes up most when you interact on social media and stuff where people are just beside themselves as to why the Steelers took somebody. Why would they do that? They already have such and such. Well, that just because we like that person doesn't mean the Steelers necessarily like that person. So
that's why they drafted Mason Rudolph?
And that's it for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in.
No, I mean they took Rudolph because it was their second, third round choice that year.
Yep.
And they just were like, the value is just too great here.
That's exactly what it was.
This guy is here. We've got to take him. It's just we need to take a chance on this.
Yeah.
So they burned the pick. No, it was actually their first third rounder because it was
the one they traded for Martavius
It was the Oakland
Bryant.
third rounder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They burned the pick they got in the trade for Martavius Bryant. And man, I said so at the time. I hated the pick.
Oh, I still
wish they hadn't done it, but I understand why they did it.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. They basically had a late first, high second on the guy. He was still available in the third. They took him.
Yeah.
I really hope there isn't a situation like that this year again with this quarterback class because I think it's a very top-heavy class.
Yes, it is.
But beyond that, I really don't like it. It's not that great a class.
So
again, in my opinion.
Yeah. Ian, who's the one guy in the first round that you're kicking back, having a delicious beverage of your choice on Thursday night next week, and the Steelers pick comes up, and who's the guy that would make you just want to climb to the top of your roof and just jump off of it?
You've been to my house. My roof is pretty high.
I have.
I live on a hill. There's a big drop off there. Oh man.
Is there one guy that would fit? I'm sure there's probably plenty, but is there one guy in particular?
Landon Dickerson concerns me because of his injury history.
Yeah.
I mean, I can make a good case for 10 guys who I think will be there that I think are worth taking.
But who's the guy that you hope isn't there and they don't take?
I mean, I think I said a few weeks ago, like Kwity Paye, Jalen Mayfield, some of those Michigan guys, I just don't want them to take. Just because
it's not just because they're Michigan guys. I agree with you. I just don't really like them. I'm just
I'm not impressed either. I'm
Mayfield's a better guard than a tackle. He doesn't have a good tackle body. Paye, we've talked about before, is might be the best pass rusher in the draft, but is simultaneously the worst run defender. He just does not care. And playing on a Steelers defense, you need to be. They want everyone to play the run. Even their cornerbacks have to be able to play the run. So, one of those guys, Mac Jones, probably.
There it is.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. So
talking about him going third overall.
Yeah, the one guy I'll say, though, I mean, we talked about Najee Harris, but I wouldn't sleep on Travis Etienne either. I mean, Tomlin, Colbert, and Matt Canada all went to Clemson's pro day.
I'm not sure he'll be there at 24.
Etienne's younger than Harris. So I wouldn't sleep on ETN here either. He's a good receiver, and I mean, we talked about, nothing helps a young quarterback more than a good running back.
It's true.
ETN's a guy who can score every time he touches the ball. So we haven't had a home run hitter like that in the backfield since Willie Parker. Yeah, and ETN has much better contact balance than Parker did. Parker would go down at first contact a lot, whereas ETN can actually run through guys and stay on his feet.
Ben, I would ask you the same
agree.
question related to who's the one guy you don't want to see us take at 24, but you've blurted out Mac Jones several times.
Jesus, man. I would be absolutely fucking apoplectic if they took him. Well, and I got to be honest, it would just be a hair smaller reaction if they took Dickerson in the first. I'd be like, what the fuck? What are you doing? Are you kidding me? Because I have a feeling that guy's going to spend a lot of time in the training room in the NFL. A lot of time.
I don't know how he won't.
He may have a fine NFL career, but he's going to miss a lot of games. And you don't take a guy like that in the first round. You just don't.
No. Ben, do the Steelers take a wide receiver in this draft?
I said a few weeks ago, they're not going to do it this year. But, man, it just seems like every single year they find value at that position.
Yep.
They'll take some kid out of some fucking community college somewhere who turns into, a really good number 2 receiver.
Right.
And you'll just be going, how do they, what?
Yeah.
I don't get it. And I'm just slightly exaggerating here. It's like they take these guys. Chase Claypool. Nobody saw that coming. Nobody saw that. He goes out there last year, and it's like, whoa, this guy actually, even with his limited route tree, because he hasn't developed it yet, even with his limited route tree, he's still a dangerous player. I did like his tape, but when he got out on the field, he was better than I expected. I think he's better than most people expected.
Here, for sure, yeah.
I would say never count it out with the Steelers, even though they don't really need it. The guy I would keep an eye on is Anthony Schwartz from Auburn.
Yeah.
Ike Hilliard, the wide receiver.
The kid from Clemson. Oh God, what is his?
Mari Rogers.
Yes,
yeah, I like him.
Ike Hilliard, the wide receiver coach, only went on one pro day visit, and that was to Auburn. And Colbert and Tomlin were there, which, granted, them going to pro days in later rounds doesn't matter as much as early rounds, but they also had a Zoom meeting with Schwartz. And Seth Williams from Auburn, too, is pretty good, but Schwartz is more of a slot receiver, which I think is more of what they need. So,
super fast.
You've got Nico Collins from Michigan, who's very similar to Chase Claypool in his body size, and unfortunately had to play with Michigan's terrible quarterbacks for the last couple of years. But
yeah, that was one of the things about Michigan receivers that made them very difficult to project, is they threw the ball so badly.
That's true.
I don't know how else to put that, and I'm not trying to.
There is no other way to put it. They were bad.
I don't know how else. It's just like when the ball.
Notre Dame receivers too, like having to play with Ian Book,
and then Notre Dame tight end,
Tommy Tremble.
Tremble. Yeah, it's really hard to project Tremble because the ball placement on the passes he was catching was fucking horrible. I was like, "Are you what? How did he get that?" It was terrible. And in the NFL, he's going to have it so much easier. So,
Speaking of tight ends, obviously we talked a little bit about Freiermuth, but Tremble is a kid that I would like in the middle rounds. We've got to add a tight end.
Yeah, I don't see Tremble lasting past the third round someplace. And
I don't either.
That might be generous. He might go in the early third, late second.
Yeah, I can see it. Not a really good tight end class.
It's a terrible tight end class. It's ugly.
Yeah, but
there are a handful of guys at the top, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, part of the issue with this tight end class is you've got guys like Tremble, like Trey McKitty from Georgia, like Hunter Long from Boston College that tested really well athletically, but were pretty much just blocking tight ends in college. So you don't have a lot of anything on them. You don't have any tape. You don't have any proof that they can actually produce in a passing game. That shows you much of anything. Noah Gray from Duke looked really good at the Senior Bowl, but probably is a 6th or 7th round pick. But you just don't know because, just doesn't have the college production. None of these guys have college production.
I watched a little bit of Hunter Long today. You want to talk about bad quarterback play? Holy crap. I mean, there were times there was nobody within 10 yards of him, and the ball was landing 5 feet in front of him. I mean, the poor kid just did not have a chance a lot of times to show what he could do. So, scouts got to be able to put those pieces together. But I would be stunned if we don't take a tight end somewhere in this draft. There's just no way we can go with Ebron and then these two young guys with very, very limited experience there.
Zach Gentry is awesome. Come on.
Oh, for God's sakes.
Michigan tight end. Those guys are great.
You watch. We're going to draft Nick Eubanks.
Okay.
As I choke on my whiskey.
Yeah.
What about inside linebacker? I think they obviously like Robert Spillane. Okay, but if they had a chance to grab somebody that could make that position better, don't you think they would do it? Ben, go ahead.
For sure. They absolutely will, because Spillane is a 2-down backer.
Yeah.
Even with his smarts, even with his anticipation, his ability to break plays down, read them quickly, and get to the spot. Vince is the same way. Even with those abilities, those guys are liabilities in pass coverage because they just aren't athletically gifted enough to keep up with NFL tight ends and running backs. And heaven forbid they have to cover a friggin' wide receiver. Yeah. God, if we keep having to fucking do that, I'm going to lose my mind.
You mean if we keep matching from the outside in on our pass coverage?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing that really bugs me. It's like I've seen. I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but I've seen Vince call the corner from the outside in to cover the number 1 receiver or the number 2 receiver, either or, and him go outside and cover the running back on the edge. And that works fine. Why don't they do that every time? Anyway,
I don't know, but I
digress.
I'm PTSD,
so
though.
We need a linebacker.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no question. I think the Devin Bush getting hurt last year really drove that point home. I expect them to take a linebacker this year. Absolutely expect it. I expect him to be a guy who can play respectably,
right?
In quote unquote sub packages, which are basically 65-70% of the defense now. So that's the kind of linebacker I expect them to take this season. Not a run stopping guy. I don't expect us to get another Devin Bush. I don't expect him to get an all purpose guy who can play the run, who can play the pass, who can do whatever you need him to do. But I do expect them to take a guy who's a respectable guy in a passing defense.
Well, and there are options. You guys have both talked a little bit about Derek Barnes out of Purdue.
Barnes. I love Derek Barnes. I think I said this last week that our first pick in the 4th round seems like the ideal spot to grab an inside linebacker, just kind of how this draft class is playing out. You should have Derek Barnes, Monty Rice from Georgia, Cam Mcgrone from Michigan, who as a mid-round pick isn't bad. He's got some athletic upside there in the middle. I like those guys in our first pick of the 4th round, which is still 23rd or 24th. Maybe Chaz Surratt from North Carolina falls to us. Baron Browning from Ohio State will probably go in the day 2, 3rd round, I would guess. Jabril Cox from LSU is probably a 2nd or 3rd round pick. I'm not as high on Nick Bolton from Missouri. I mean, he's
faded a little bit in recent weeks.
His change of direction worries me. His straight line speed is really good, but his change of direction worries me.
Yeah,
so,
I agree.
And we talked about Surratt from North Carolina last week, that he was a quarterback. I mean, heck, he's out there taking snaps, throwing the ball, a dual threat quarterback. The
only thing that bugs me about Surratt is he's already 24. He's very close to his ceiling.
Oh yeah. But I mean,
he's a smart guy. He's been around.
Anyone
you
who
talked
can
about the fact that he was. You talked about the fact that he was a quarterback and that's fantastic. He's smart. Obviously, he's converted from quarterback to linebacker. He did the opposite of Sam Darnold, who went from linebacker to quarterback. maybe he should have stayed at linebacker. Yeah, I was really high on that guy when he came out, which tells you just how good I am at
I thought
grading out quarterbacks. A guy I like that nobody's really talked about, and he's a Michigan kid, is Cameron Mcgrone. Not real flashy, does not have long speed, has pretty good change of direction, isn't real tall, is heavy enough, young, higher upside, could develop into something. That's kind of the opposite of a guy like Surratt, who we're talking about now.
Yeah, the interesting thing with Mcgrone is if you don't watch Michigan's defense, now Don Brown was the defensive coordinator there, and he's now gone, thank God. Basically, this was a defense that put its corners on an island and just brought the house, okay? And so I don't know that we really truly know the type of athlete that Mcgrone is. I think he's going to end up being a better NFL player than he was a college player. Now, I realize my loyalties to Michigan are clouding my judgment a little bit, but I just got that feeling because when you get him in a system where he isn't blitzing all the time, or he doesn't have one specific thing he has to do, I'm spitballing, but with
Mcgrone, I see a guy you take in the later rounds. You take him like round 5 on.
Yes.
It's like, okay, we need a linebacker. This kid is still here. He's not going to give you. Who would I compare him to? Like, I was going to say Williamson, but he's not that fast, but he has better change of direction than Williamson does. Bart Scott, maybe.
That's not a bad one.
Yeah, I mean, not a guy who's going to make the Hall of Fame, who's going to make a lot of Pro Bowls or anything like that. But he's going to be respectable. He's going to be a guy you can lean on, you can count on a regular basis, and that's a pretty good guy to have in that spot. Larry Foote.
Yeah, I was going to say Foote, but I didn't want to bring up another Michigan guy, so I just kept my
Larry
mouth shut.
Footy.
Larry Foote. Oh, Larry, he's a good guy. Guys, as we wind this whole thing down in a week to go here, Ian, if you had to put all your chips in the middle right now and say this is who the Steelers are going to draft next Thursday night, who's it going to be?
Yeah, I don't know. But here's what I will say. So we talked about a couple of the, boxes that get checked, trends, all that. Yeah. So I just want to run through them again real quick for people just to put them all out there. So we mentioned that since Colbert was hired in 2000, only 1 first and 1 second round pick came from non-power conferences. So if you're looking at where they're going early, it's power conferences. In addition to that, 16 of Colbert's 20 first-round picks came from teams that finished ranked in the AP Top 25 in the final poll. So you also want to look at, I think Colbert said before, he wants players from winning programs. He wants guys who are winners. So, the guys, I think Bud Dupree was not on a top 25 team. Right. Artie Burns was not on a top 25 team. One of those worked out okay. One of those did not. Such as it is, but so not only power conferences, but also ranked teams. Interestingly, though, I should mention that Ben Roethlisberger did not come from a power conference, but was on a ranked team because Miami of Ohio was really good when he was there.
Yes, they did. Yeah.
Yes. We already talked about the age thing, that since 2003, only 1 first-round pick was older than 22, so 22 and younger is a good one to look at. Since 2014, they've really looked at guys who are highly athletic. So, whether it's Spark or RAS or whatever metric you want to find online to measure athleticism, their early round picks have been young, highly athletic from power conference ranked schools. And as we mentioned, also the pro day thing, that Tomlin and Colbert have been to the pro day of basically their first round picks.
So in other words, you're doing a tremendous job of stalling here, Ian.
I'm just running through it for everyone. I mean,
he's running through Ian's forensic files.
Yes. So I mean,
which is fine. He's doing the forensic files thing.
If you want to narrow it down based on all of those criteria, I mean, Najee Harris is eliminated on age, but still is a very good pick. And as I've said all along, I would not be sad about Najee Harris being a Pittsburgh Steeler. I'd be very happy about that. Travis Etienne checks all the boxes. Pat Freiermuth checks all the boxes. We said Tevin Jenkins looks really good on tape. Doesn't check a couple of the boxes.
Doesn't check the boxes.
Alex Leatherwood from Alabama, however, does check the boxes.
Yeah, can you see him at left tackle either? I can't
No.
either.
No. Look at his wingspan, though. He's got like an
5-inch
wingspan.
It is
huge. Yeah, okay, great. Russ Grimm took Max Starks because he had this gigantic wingspan. As he put it, you need a cab to get around that guy. He's so big. Okay?
Yes.
And Max Starks was not a good left tackle. He was not. He never was. Even when he developed and he
better
was,
at left than at right, though.
Player. Even when he developed and he was a franchise player, he still was not a good left tackle.
He was better at left than at right.
God, I hope we don't take him in the first round because I don't like that guy at left tackle.
Anyway, Ian, your selection is.
Oh man, I mean, if I had to put my feet to the fire right now, oh man, I mean, I really can I narrow it down to 3?
For the love of God!
I mean,
yes, go ahead.
All right,
Mac Jones, Landon Dickerson,
I'd say Travis Etienne, Alex Leatherwood, and Asante Samuel Jr. would be my 3.
All right.
I really think. I mean, they went to Florida State's pro day. I know Florida State wasn't a ranked team.
No,
but Asante Samuel Jr. has the NFL bloodlines. He's got the talent. He's got the athleticism. You could plug him in at slot corner right now and potentially put him outside later.
They do like the bloodlines.
Yep. Yeah, I think Asante Samuel Jr. is really seriously in the conversation for this pick. So, I'd say Etienne, Leatherwood, and Asante Samuel Jr. would be my top 3. Okay. Not in that order. I'd say Etienne first, Samuel second.
Ben.
Well, I'm going to pee all over what Ian just said and tell you guys that I think this year is going to be a total aberration.
All right.
I will not, if they end up doing this, consider it as a part of their history because it's such a weird year.
Yep,
it's so weird.
It is.
From a draft standpoint, not just for us and the limited amount of availability of information, consumable information that's out there, but also the fact that the Steelers are under these weird constraints when it comes to seeing players firsthand, seeing them in person. Right. So I just think it's going to be a weird year. A lot of things are going to happen day one. A lot of dominoes are going to fall with a lot of teams that are going to impact the entire draft and make things fall in such a way that we're just going to go, what the hell? And again, whatever happens this year, I'm going to throw it out. I'm prepared already just to throw it out and go, okay, we're not including that in the tendencies because this year is just a total aberration. It's just so flippin' weird. I think the Steelers have got the potential, for a trade back with Green Bay. Green Bay has 10 picks. Green Bay has been aggressive in the past with trading. Of course, there has to be a player that Green Bay likes that's falling and gets to 24-ish for the Steelers to be able to trade back to 29. But if the Steelers can do that, they trade back to 29, and they can pick up like a third-round pick. That would give them
an ideal scenario.
It is. I'd love it.
Absolutely. Another top 100 pick. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it would be fantastic. They'd get another pick on day 2. I'd love that, and we'll see, and hopefully it happens. But what I'd like to see them do is trade back and take, Pat Freiermuth or Creed Humphrey.
Yes,
or
I love.
Yeah, I would love either of those.
I like Humphrey a lot.
Yep.
I think it's too early to take Spencer Brown. That's me. My feelings wouldn't be hurt if both Etienne and Harris were off the board and they took a Javonte Williams at 29. That wouldn't bother me. That might be a little bit early.
Either. Yeah.
That it might be a little bit early to take Williams, but I'd be okay with it. Or an Asante Samuel. An Asante Samuel at 29.
I'd be okay with that.
I'd be pretty psyched. And
Do you think he makes it to 29?
Yeah, I think Samuel thinks it's 29.
Well, Williams is not making it to 55. Therefore, I'd be fine taking him at 29.
Probably not.
I don't see him making it that far.
Probably not, but maybe. I'm back and forth. But
no, I know.
Williams is a really ideal fit for the offense I think they're going to run.
I view it that way too.
Yeah, he's outstanding, and he broke almost as many tackles as Najee Harris this year. And I think he played fewer games. He did. He played fewer games. So it is what it is. But we'll see next week. We're obviously I think we're planning on getting together immediately after the first pick, right?
We are. In fact, we might even get together during the pick. I think that would be exciting to get our reactions as the pick is made, but we'll talk more about that in the week to come. And I would love a trade down. I think if we can pick up one or two extra picks, I would be thrilled, over the moon, all of those things you want to say. And I did want to just mention one non-draft topic.
Wait a minute. You didn't answer your own fucking question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't, did I? Shit. I was trying to get away with that. I completely understand where Ben is coming from, that this has been an extremely unusual year. So the possibility is really, really high that they break from some traditional tendencies. Now, what that ultimately means, I don't know. Does that mean Najee Harris? I just don't know. I would not be stunned if they pull one of those Artie Burns things where nobody sees it coming. I don't know who it would be, but I'm a believer you build in the offensive line first. You find a running back in the second or third round. And I would love Creed Humphrey. I think that's my center. I think there's your anchor for the next 10 years plus. He doesn't have nearly the injury problems that Landon Dickerson has.
It isn't just that. He's a better athlete than Pouncey was.
I agree. He's a former wrestler.
Yeah, yep. He's wrestled his entire life. He understands leverage. And with proper coaching, he could be great.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of centers, though, not as a first-round pick, but a later round, don't sleep on Josh Myers from Ohio State. He's not bad as like a third or fourth round pick.
He's a third or fourth round guy.
But can Josh Myers come in this year and start?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
The thing. Humphrey, I can plug in right now.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's where I'm kind of at. And I know he doesn't check all the boxes in terms of the Tomlin Colbert stuff, but I just really like him. So I mean, he would be a great fit for me at 24, and especially trading down. I love the Green Bay theory. I think it's tremendous. I would be thrilled if they can pull that off, because they really, really, this is one of those years the Steelers need the extra picks. They've got that much depth and that many starting positions to take care of. And before I go, I would like to say, shut the hell up, Tom Brady. I mean, he's all upset because the league has agreed to allow players to change numbers. Oh no, now I won't be able to identify who the linebackers are from the defensive backs. For once, isn't it nice that the defense maybe gets a rule changed in its favor? Oh God, shut up.
I don't hate the rule change. I'll just say don't buy any players' jerseys this year because there's going to be a lot of changes.
Oh, there's going to be a lot of changes.
I agree, and I think that one, A lot of players will not change numbers this year. And fans need to be aware of that. Like,
right.
If Juju Smith-Schuster, for example, decides that he's going to go from number 19 to number 9, he has to buy.
Yes.
He personally has to purchase, or purchase is the wrong word. He has to make up the cost for all of the number 19 jerseys that have already been produced by NFL suppliers. Okay? You're talking tens of thousands of dollars to change your fucking jersey number. A lot of guys are going to go, no, the hell with that. I'll change it next year.
Right.
And I'll let them know I'm doing that in 2022. And then I won't have to pay anything.
No, it's an excellent point.
Ian made the point. It's dead on. Don't buy any jerseys this year because guys, or buy throwbacks. because if you're a Steelers fan, get yourself a Donnie Shell jersey because he's going to the Hall of Fame this year. That'll be a great jersey to own. I think it's a fantastic idea. You know, get yourself a Vince Williams away jersey. I got one of those. Those are great.
That ain't changing, folks.
That ain't changing. I agree. You know, go with somebody who's safe. Do not go with the young guns because they're going to change their numbers. I wouldn't even buy a Minkah Fitzpatrick jersey this year.
Oh no! What was he at Alabama? He was a single digit, wasn't he? God, I thought he was.
Was he like
29 in
something?
Miami?
Oh, maybe he was 29. You're right.
He was 29 in Miami.
Yeah,
maybe
I think that's what
he
was
was 29 in Alabama. I don't know. He said he wasn't changing because he had a good year his first year with the Steelers.
Agreed.
So he was leaving it. But it won't shock me if he changes it now.
Anyway, that'll
about Alabama too.
What's that?
Yeah,
he was 29 at Alabama.
That's what I thought.
Was he?
That's what I thought. Okay.
Which is honestly why I haven't bought a Minkah jersey yet. He's the one guy I would buy a jersey for, but like,
he says he's not changing. Yeah, he said he wasn't changing to 29 this year. He's like, I had a good first year with the Steelers. It's just a good omen for me just to stick with the same jersey, so I'm sticking with it.
Yeah. Nope. I think that's what's going to happen. You're going to see this all kind of come to a head in a year from now because those guys aren't going to want to be spending that kind of money. Anyway, we will be back with you next week during the draft, and boy, are we looking forward to it. We are ready to go, and
I'm kind of looking forward to it being over. You know, honestly, I'm really looking forward to the meltdown on Twitter. No matter what the Steelers do, it isn't going to matter. Steelers Twitter is going to lose its fucking collective mind.
If they draft Najee Harris, I think it's going to be overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah, but it was overwhelmingly positive when they took Rashard Mendenhall. It was.
Was it?
It was. The 2008 draft, everybody thought was going to be the greatest draft ever, and it was terrible. That was the worst draft that I think it's the worst draft on the Colbert record, I think. Ian?
Yes,
correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, statistically speaking, it is, and I have data to back that up. That's
all I'll say. 2009, I thought was way worse than Ian said it was, but I still think that was a shitty draft.
The Steelers 2008 draft, for those of you keeping score at home, that was Rashard Mendenhall.
Terrible. Swede.
And eventually a young man named Limas Swede, who, God love the man's effort for blocking, but he couldn't catch a cold. Bruce Davis, linebacker out of UCLA. Turnstile Tony Hills from Texas. Dennis Dixon, who played at Oregon. Linebacker Mike Humple from Iowa. And actually, the one guy you could argue had the best career out of all of them in the 6th round, Ryan Mundy of West Virginia.
And Woodland Hills High School.
I was going to say,
he started at Michigan too, didn't he? He went to Michigan first.
He did.
West Virginia. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Yep. But anyway, we'll be back with you next week during the draft. We're looking forward to it, and we hope you are too. For Ben and Ian, this is Steel Dad signing off on the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by Deck Roofing of South Florida. And hey, go Steelers.
Ravens suck.